Hello, our dear grade 7 learners. Welcome to another scientific episode. Today, we'll discuss about Mendelian genetics. The most essential learning competency is predict phenotypic expressions of traits following simple patterns of inheritance. Specifically, you will be able to 1. Define genotype and phenotype. 2. Identify the genotypic and phenotypic expressions of traits following simple patterns of inheritance. Lastly, solve and predict the genotypic and phenotypic expressions of traits following simple patterns of inheritance in monohybrid crops. Get ready with your pen, paper, and modules and be ready with today's lesson. Before we start our discussion, let us have a short recall of our previous topic. On your paper, draw a happy face if the given statement gives a correct idea, and sad face if it is not. Are you ready? Let's begin. Number 1. The different type of reproductions are sexual, binary, and asexual reproduction. The answer is a happy face. Number 2. Asexual reproduction involves two parents. The answer is a sad face. Number 3. Meiosis is a cell division that happens in our sex cells or gametes. The answer is a happy face. Number 4. In binary fission, parent and offspring are identical. The answer is a happy face. Number 5. Gametes are diploids, zygote is haploid. The answer is a sad face. Did you get all the correct answers? Very good. And you are now ready to our next topic. For those who did not, don't worry. That is still okay. What you can do is review again with the help of your learning modules. Or you may ask the assistance of your classmates or your teacher.
Heredity, variation, principle of dominance, law of segregation, recessive traits, dominant traits. These are some words that you may encounter in our today's lesson. You already know that when we say genetics, this is a study of heredity and variation. When we say heredity, it is the study how traits are passed on from parents to offspring or from one generation to the next generation. When we say variation, it studies on why organisms differ from each other. Why do you have a curly or straight hair? Why you are tall or short? Why do you have dimples while others do not? And other characteristics that differ one organism to another. We will learn all these things in our today's discussion. During the 1800s, scientists started to study about heredity through scientific experiments. Gregor Mendel paved the way to our understanding of how traits are passed on from one generation to the next. Because of this, he is known to be the father of genetics. How did Mendel discover about the study of genetics? He studied the 7 traits of pea plants. He used pea plants for these reasons. First, pea plants have several traits that are easily recognizable. Second, they are easy to grow. Third, they reproduce through self-pollination. These are the 7 characteristics studied by Mendel. 1. Seed shape. Number 2. Seed color. Number 3. pod shape. Number 4, pod color. 5, flower color. 6, flower position. And 7, stem length. For seed shape, he used smooth and wrinkled. For seed color, he used yellow and green. For pod shape, he made use of inflated and constricted. For pod color, he used green and yellow. For flower color, he made use of purple and white. For flower position, he used axial and terminal. And for the stem length, he made use of tall and short. In Mendel's experiment, he began cross-pollinating peas with constructing traits. He called this cross as first parental generation or P1. The table shows the result of Mendel's crosses between pure breeding pea plants. We have in the table the characteristics being studied. The first parental generation or P1 and the first filial generation or F1. The first filial generation or F1 is the offspring of the parental cross. These are the results of cross-pollinating the parents. Mendel repeated his experiment many times and got the same results. He then hypothesized that the appearance of traits were controlled by factors called genes. Each trait is controlled by 2 alleles. What is the difference between genes and alleles? When we say genes, it is a unit of hereditary information, while alleles decode the transmission of traits. From the result of his experiment, he proposed the Mendelian principles, the principle of dominance and the principle of segregation. Principle of dominance states that one member of the factor may hide or prevent the appearance of the other. Going back with the results, we observed that in the first filial generation, only one trait is expressed out of the 2 traits of the parents. Like the seed color, the offspring is colored yellow. This trait is a dominant trait which hides or masks the appearance of the other trait. And the trait that do not appear or express in the F1 generation is called recessive trait. A recessive trait may appear in the second filial generation. Another principle is the principle of segregation. This states that the pair of alleles segregate or separate from each other during the formation of gametes in meiosis. One gene goes to one gamete and the other gene goes to another gamete. For example, a purebred yellow seed with an alleles of 2 capital Y, the gametes are both capital Y, since the genes of these alleles are alike. Same is true with homozygous green pea plant with an allele of 2 small y. The gametes are 2 small y. Symbols are used to indicate the factors or alleles. Capital letters for dominant trait and small letters for recessive trait. For example, in seed color, we have yellow and green. In the F1 generation, the offspring is yellow. This means that yellow is the dominant. What will be the symbol for this allele? Yellow would be capital Y and green would be small y. We have also the term homozygous or pure and heterozygous or hybrid. What is the difference between the two? Homozygous or pure means the alleles for a given trait is identical or the same. Like for example, in homozygous yellow pea plant, the alleles would be 2 capital Y. This is also termed as homozygous dominant since the trait yellow is dominant. Another example is the homozygous green pea plant. The alleles would be 2 small y. This is also termed as homozygous recessive since green trait is recessive. For heterozygous or hybrid, the 2 alleles for a particular trait are different. For example, when the gamete capital Y combines with the gamete small y, the zygote will have a genotype of YY. One capital and the other is small, which is heterozygous or hybrid. Y are called genotypes of the offspring. When we say genotype, it is the genetic makeup of an organism. How about the observable trait of an organism based on its genotype? We call this as phenotype. In the case of capital Y and small y, since yellow is dominant, the phenotype of the offspring is heterozygous yellow. Another example for genotype is 2 small y. The phenotype of this organism is homozygous green. For 2 capital Y genotype, the phenotype is homozygous yellow.
This process can be recorded in a chart called Competency square devised by Reginald Panet. It looks like this. Competency square helps us predict the possible combinations of genes in a given cross. It helps us also predict easily the outcome of a given cross. For example, a homozygous green pea plant is being crossed with a heterozygous green pea plant. What will be the genotype and the phenotype of the first filial generation? First, let us determine the possible genes of the parents. Let us use capital G for the genes. For homozygous green, the genes are 2 capital G. For the heterozygous green, the genes are 1 capital G and small g. Next, draw a square and divide it into 4 boxes. Then, write the letters of the possible genes for a trait. The female genes are written down on the left side and the male genes are written across the top of the square. Then, start crossing the female gametes with the male gametes in each box until all the boxes are filled. Finally, let us interpret the result. There are 4 offsprings produced from the crossing. The genotypic ratio is 50% homozygous and 50% heterozygous. The phenotypic ratio is 100% green or all the offsprings are green. Any questions? I hope you followed the given example. And if there are no more clarifications, this ends our discussion on Mendelian genetics.
Let us now summarize all the concepts that we have learned in our discussion for today. Gregor Mendel paved the way to our understanding of how traits are passed on from one generation to the next and considered as the father of genetics. Traits are observable characteristics of an organism, while alleles are alternative form of genes that code for certain trait. Homozygous alleles are identical. Heterozygous alleles have different forms for a particular trait. Dominant allele expresses itself in the presence or absence of recessive trait, while recessive allele expresses itself only in the absence of dominant allele. Genotype represents the genetic makeup of an organism, while phenotype represents the observable trait of an organism. Reginald Panet devised the Panet square to predict all of the possible combination of genotypes that can occur in an offspring based on the genotypes of their parents. Monohybrid cross is a cross between parents different in only one trait. Now, let's check your understanding. Get ready with your pen and paper. Fill in each blank with the correct answers from the terms given below. The terms are dominance, Panet square, homozygous, monohybrid, and traits. For number 1, inheritance of blank is controlled by genes. Number 2, the blank are involved across using a single factor or trait. Number 3, law of blank states that one member of the pair factors or genes may mask or hide the appearance of the genes. irregular alleles are called blank. And for number 5, the blank is a diagram that allows us to determine the possible combination of genes in a given cross. It's time to check your answers. For number 1, the correct answer is traits. For number 2, monohybrid. Number 3, dominance. Number 4, homozygous. And for number 5, Punnett square. A job well done, grade 7 learners.
That's all for today. Again, this is Ma'am Jenny,
Ma'am Novi,
Ma'am Rachel,
And Ma'am Wendy.
your scientific teachers. See you in the next episode of our lesson. Always remember to keep safe